The logging industry might not seem like an action-packed world of politics and schemes, but you'd be surprised. Where I used to work, there were about 4 different companies all trying to put each other out of business. There was also an adjacent area that bordered on a national park. So yeah, if you looked at it from above, it all looks like forest. But there are a lot of invisible lines to look for. I was part of a regulatory watchdog. All the companies in the area called on us as an independent third party to settle land disputes and accusations of overstepping regulatory boundaries. Basically, we were the checks and balances that made sure they all played nice. That this particular case landed on my desk was a matter of contention. The last 2 cases that had been dropped in my lap ended up being lengthy and unnecessary legal battles, so my supervisor had been putting off giving me fieldwork for about 2 months. There was some pressure to vacate my seat entirely, and I wasn't eager to make a fool of myself for a 3rd time. So whatever this was, it had to go off without a hitch. I was given a couple of files: satellite images, statements, interviews, and witness testimony. There was this space at the edge of company property that had been cut down and cleared out illegally. Insurance companies had demanded a complete third-party review before they agreed to a payout. There was also an issue with the nearby park services, as damage had been done to protected land, making the rangers suspect that this was either self-inflicted or the work of an organised third party. Now, making arrests or proceeding with a formal criminal investigation is the work of the police, but my job was to give them a neutral and objective perspective, something they could point to as evidence of suspicion, of foul play. An acre or 2 might sound like a lot of land to cover, but when you're dealing with multiple sites of about 15 to 25 acres separately, it quickly falls under the radar. Given how close this land was to the edge of the property, I suspect they hadn't intended to clear it anytime soon, so they must have stumbled upon this by accident. I drove out early Monday morning. I had a meeting with one of the foremen working in the area to corroborate the statements I'd been given, and it all checked out. They hadn't been operating in the area. There were no witnesses who could say what had happened, and no one had investigated it close enough to cause any obstruction. We were good to go. I was put in contact with an assistant foreman named Michael, a very driven man in his early 30s, whose head seemed to have been fused with the mandatory white helmet they made us wear. He had this handlebar mustache that made me think of cartoonish uncle. I met him by a signal orange Jeep with the company logo printed in all black.
"I'm just here to get you where you need to go,"
he explained.
"I'm not here to intrude."
"I'm sure that won't be a problem," I smiled. "You know where we're headed?"
"Of course, yeah. It's been the talk of the crew for a week now."
"How so?" I asked.
"You hear things,"
he explained.
"like how no lumber was stolen."
"What?"
"Yeah,
he reiterated.
no lumber's been stolen. Most of it just kinda lay there."
That part had been conveniently left out of my prep work. Driving through untrained lands in a Jeep isn't as comfortable as it sounds. Sudden dips and rocks and fallen trees make for a bumpy ride, and if you're not used to it, it's going to cost you your lunch. I was prepared enough, but I noticed Michael looking over a couple of times. He probably wasn't used to outside passengers having spent a lot of time in the wild. And to be fair, I didn't really look the part.
"I'm not sure what exactly you do."
Michael admitted.
"Some sort of insurance thing."
"That's part of it, yeah. But I'm mostly here to make sure everyone plays along."
"They do,"
he said.
"I mean, it's all the same guys."
"What do you mean?"
"I mean, there are only so many loggers in one area, you know. You quit one place, you go to another."
"So you all know each other? Even at other logging companies?"
"Yeah,"
he said, clutching the wheel as we barreled through a bent sapling, leaves brushing against the windows.
I'm just saying, I don't know any guy who's motivated enough to bring in a crew to cut this stuff, which means it's an outside thing.
Or something natural, I added. Wildfire, soil degradation. It's not usually that black and white.
No offense, but in my experience it is.
Michael rolled onto a half-finished road. It lined the space between the government-owned park space and the edge of the logging area. It was only meant for industry use, but it was surreal to see. This one line of asphalt in the middle of the towering woods, stretching on for as far as the eye could see. If you were to accidentally get turned around, it'd be impossible to tell which way you were going. The forest opened into a clearing on both sides of the road. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The trees were either bent, broken, or cut down. There were definite signs of human intervention with clean-cut stumps. Stepping out of the jeep, something just felt wrong, like we'd entered some kind of dead zone. You could taste the exposed, sugary sap in the air. Normally, this space would be ripe with wildlife, but I couldn't hear a thing. No birds, no buzzing, nothing. Michael took me a bit to the side and waved at a man by the tree line. The man was clearly a park ranger, somewhere in his late 60s. He was short and had a sort of lanky build, but with the sinewy look of someone too tough to quit. Michael introduced me, and the man shook my hand.
"Ranger Wilson?"
he said.
"Thought I'd give you a hand given our circumstance."
You got an idea what's happening here? I asked.
"Area's always been quirky,"
he explained.
"Most of the damage has been done on the park side."
How much damage are we looking at? Ranger Wilson scratched his chin with his scrawny fingers.
"About 1.5 acre on the company side, about 2 on the park side. Most people never come out this way. We were informed by our gracious neighbors."
Michael excused himself from the conversation, leaving me with a walkie-talkie to call in when I needed a ride back. With Michael out of the picture, Wilson relaxed his shoulders as he took lead.
"Place used to be teeming with folks back in the 70s.
He explained as we walked.
Called it Slumberjack Woods.
Strange name.
Well, they mostly went out here to get high and skinny dip in the river. There was this glade nearby that had an amazing view, perfect for hippy dippies and drum circles.
You don't sound too happy about it.
Just sad to see the good times pass us by."
He gave me a knowing grin with a silent explanation. I could sense who we might have been in the equation of unruly 70s teenagers. The damage done to the area was significant, but not as clear-cut as first believed. There were some trees that had been cut down with a chainsaw, others with an axe. Not all of them, though. Some were brought down by wildlife. Ranger Wilson pointed out a couple of fallen trees with fresh marks from bears. There were also signs of beavers.
"Ain't a lot of beavers this far west of the river,"
he explained.
"For them to go out of their way like this, it's strange."
You know what's happened to all the bushes and branches? I asked.
"What do you mean?"
I bent down, adjusting my shoes. I pointed at one of the fallen trees, showing the damage done to the lower edges of the trunk. Branches had been broken off and removed. You can see this on a couple of trees, I said. And some of the saplings are missing entirely.
"I'll be damned. Good eye."
According to satellite imagery, most of the damage had been done in a sort of oval shape, with the majority being on the park side. I showed it to Wilson and asked if we could check out the center. There had to be a specific point where whoever did this started, and maybe that could give us an idea of how long it had been going on. Traversing this kind of environment takes a toll, though. Fallen trees, and branches, and rocks. You gotta make sure you don't slip, or you'll dislocate an ankle quicker than a flash flood. Not to mention, you might be dangling your toes into a viper's nest. Tough boots or not, You don't want to tempt fate more than necessary. So why Slumberjack Woods? I asked. I don't get the name.
Well, when you've had a bit to smoke, you usually doze off. It's not that complicated, son.
That's all,
Well, a couple of folks claimed it was the best sleep of their lives.
he continued.
Some would come here before a big test or a job interview just to relax for a bit. Used to camp out for a day or so, listening to music and sitting by the river.
I guess some places just kind of stick with you.
I guess they do.
We ended up by the river, following it northwest. We were somewhere around the center, but with things looking so different from what Wilson was used to, it was difficult to find any meaningful landmarks. We ended up walking straight across the clearing without seeing anything but fallen trees. Sometime after lunch, Wilson found a comfortable spot in the shade and had a sandwich. As he finished it, he leaned back and covered his face with his hat.
Give me 10 minutes.
He said,
Don't stray too far.
I'll check that hill for a bit, I said. Southwest.
All right.
He sighed,
10 minutes, then I'll join you.
and with that, he was out like a light. What a gift. I took a short walk. There was a hill not too far from the river which gave me a great overview. It was strange seeing so much empty space in the middle of such a lively area of the woods. I didn't know what to make of this. It felt like an industrial level operation, but the signs showed a variety of tools and causes. There was no immediate answer, and that was unusual for my line of work. I remember spotting a couple of chickadees among the fallen trees, picking branches and leaves for their nest, the first signs of life I'd seen out there. As they noticed me watching, they took off westward. There was something there, in the distance. I couldn't make out the details, but it was in a sort of dip between two hills. You couldn't see it from a low position, making it practically invisible unless you were at the right angle. Peculiar. I went to investigate. I could still see the hill where I'd been standing, so I could call for Wilson if necessary. But I made my way down, noticing a path. It was the first sign of movement or organised effort I'd seen. A clear path with drag marks. I rounded the edge of one of the hills and wiped some sweat off my forehead. Minnesota summers are no joke, and I had the sunscreen to prove it. I stopped dead in my tracks. The path kept dipping into a sort of crater. It was about 30 feet across and 20 or so feet deep. The entire thing was covered in fallen trees, branches, bushes, leaves, twigs, saplings and roots. Pretty much whatever you could break off and carry, all pushed into a single massive pile. It was deceptively large. Even at this depth, the pile was tall enough to rival the surrounding hills. It would only take a couple more feet for it to be visible from all directions. I just kind of marveled at it. The effort it would take to bring this together was enormous. I looked up, only to see Wilson standing on the top of the westward hill. He was holding a small hand axe and dragging along a couple of branches. With little fanfare, he dropped it onto the gargantuan pile, causing a ripple of movement among the branches. A couple of chickadees took flight, and looking a bit closer, I saw a falcon. A raptor nesting alongside prey animal. "Wilson," I called out. "What are you doing?"
Huh?
He looked down at me, clutching his hand axe.
What do you mean?
He asked. "What's with the branches? What's with this?" I gestured towards the pile. Wilson turned to it, scratching his head.
Jesus.
He muttered.
What the hell happened here?
We took some pictures and investigated it. At first it just looked like a disorganized pile but there was some sense to it. Most of the trees that had been dragged there lined the bottom and the edge, while most of the larger branches were on the inside. It was structurally sound. The outside was mostly covered in leaves and bird nests. I confirmed that, yes, I could see falcons alongside chickadees and cardinals. There were also signs of raccoons, and I spotted a couple of curious eyes peering out at me, possibly foxes. Ranger Wilson pointed out deer droppings nearby. All in all, this didn't make sense to me. Animals didn't congregate into piles, especially not a man-made one, which put a couple of things into consideration. One, that this wasn't a natural process. Two, that this wasn't man-made. All the while, I couldn't get a straight answer from Wilson about his contribution to the pile. He shrugged it off and was noticeably quieter from that point forward. That was one of the most curious things about the pile, just how quiet it was. This was a massive collection of trees and bushes, teeming with life, but it was silent as a grave. No chirps or songs, no buzzing insects. I could see ants and bees crawling next to one another, carrying the occasional leaf or pine needle. I could see mice scurrying around, carrying twigs with their teeth. I walked up to the pile to look a little closer. There were holes for larger mammals to crawl through, giving it the appearance of a nest, or a mound, rather than just a pile of debris. There were things living in there, no doubt.
There were other stories about this place back in the day.
Wilson called out from atop the hill.
There was this bonfire.
What about it? I asked as I peered into the nest.
A lot of folks came by to build a bonfire. It was supposed to be this amazing thing to burn at the end of summer. A lot of folks came around to pile stuff on.
It wouldn't happen to be this pile right here, would it?
Not sure,
He admitted.
Area looks different now that it's all dead. But yeah, they never burned the thing. I guess they were happy enough just building it.
I looked a little closer, seeing a couple of eyes reflect at me from the depth of the pile. Doesn't look all that dead to me, I muttered.
Doesn't look dead at all.
Wilson explained as he escorted me back to the road. The bonfire had been this idea by some of the regulars. They would come back every now and then, have a smoke, and then go chopping up something to add to the pile. Hence the Jack part in Slumberjack Woods.
It was just something to clear your mind.
He said.
Like meditation, you know?
So you're saying they've been clearing this area since the 70s?
Hell no,
He laughed.
I'm saying that's what they did back then. People have moved on. Haven't seen anyone around these parts for years.
So what are you suggesting? I asked. What's happened here? He scratched his head and looked back, shaking his head.
I don't have a God's honest clue, truth be told.
I called Michael and waved goodbye to Wilson for now. Wilson yawned and lumbered back into the woods, following an old trail. I didn't have to wait long for Michael to pick me up with his jeep, asking me what I'd learned as we drove off. I told him about the pile.
We'll get someone to clear that out,
He said.
Shouldn't be too much trouble.
You got any idea what it is? I asked. Looks like a lot of work,
I've checked with the guys who found it.
he said.
A guy who used to go up there to take a nap during lunch hour. He didn't have a very good explanation.
What did he say?
Not much.
Michael sighed.
He just sort of found it. Went up there for a nap, got a bit confused and ended up in the clearing.
That happen a lot with your crew? I asked. They get confused much?
Can't say they do.
He pointed in the rearview mirror. The clearing could still be seen in the distance.
But around that part of the woods, I guess they do.
I spent most of that evening collecting my thoughts and findings. I summarized the various conclusions I could draw, but ended up with an empty line under conclusion. That was the one part I couldn't figure out. I sent what I had to my superior, knowing full and well that I'd get a stern talking to about not having an answer. Inconclusive reports had been my downfall for the Part 2 cases, and this wasn't looking to fare any better. The next day I wasn't just meeting up with Michael. I was meeting up with about 10 of his guys, all in various vehicles. And at the forefront of it all was an excavator, with that same signal orange colour and the company logo. Michael was excited to get this done and over with. I got in his Jeep as the little convoy rolled out.
They're probably not going to want to push this issue,
He said.
They don't really care about that lumber as long as no one else has been making a profit.
Well, there is no sign of that, I said. But something's up, that's for sure. It was unreal seeing those machines roll into the clearing, bumping over fallen trees and dry stumps. A couple of people had gotten out of their jeeps to guide it through, waving and directing it with hand signals. Getting closer to the pile, I noticed a silhouette on the hill. I looked up to see Wilson, standing by a fallen tree, chucking branches onto the pile. I excused myself from Michael and got out. It took me a while to navigate the brambles, but I made it all the way atop the hill. As the crew rounded the corner and oohed and ahed about the pile, Wilson was just standing there, casually throwing branches. His eyes were closed. I observed him closely. He moved slowly, but with the same confidence as always. He leaned down, broke off a branch from a tree, and threw it down the hill. I could see a couple chickadees rock back and forth as the branch landed next to their nest, but they didn't take flight. They didn't have a care in the world. I tapped Wilson on the shoulder and watched his eyes open. He groaned a little and looked down at his hands, covered in tree sap and scratches. "You all right?" I asked.
Must have nodded off.
He said.
What day is it?
I wanted to tell him that's something he ought to know, but there was a tone to his voice that didn't lend itself to sarcasm. I shook off the thought and gave him a pat on the back. "You need me to call someone? You good?"
I'm good.
He insisted.
I'm good.
Then he saw the excavator. He looked up at me, then down at Michael and his crew. Then he was off like someone had fired a racing pistol. Wilson hurried down the hill to meet with Michael and his crew. They almost came to blows immediately. I thought the two of them knew each other pretty well, but that didn't seem to be the case. Michael argued that the pile was on company property, while Wilson argued that it could be the home to endangered species, and that we couldn't do anything to it before we had a clear idea of what it was. But while they argued, the excavator crept closer. There was a sort of electricity in the air, a spark. Something didn't feel right, and I could watch the hair on my arm stand at attention, like I dragged my feet across a rubber carpet. Michael grabbed his walkie-talkie and gave the operator the go-ahead. Wilson knocked the walkie out of his hands, and the two escalated from words to finger-pointing and getting in each other's face. Meanwhile, I listened to the walkie-talkie. "Coming up on the side now," the operator said. "Looks like a beaver dam from hell." I could hear the whine of the machine as it lifted the arm up high, ready to be brought down. "You hear that?" the operator said. "There's something. I don't know." I tried to call Michael over, but he was too busy berating Wilson, who in turn was busy berating him back. The crew was looking worried, and the operator was sounding more worried still. The excavator's arm hung still in the air. "There's something in here," he continued. "Not, like, in there, but..." The operator flung his arm about as if waving away an insect. Then he did it again. And then he moved around the cabin. Shit, there's something on the floor. There's something on... The other crew members hurried his way as Michael looked up, asking Wilson to shut up. Then, a scream. One we didn't need a walkie-talkie to hear. We all rushed forward. I saw one guy trip over something, clutching his leg. Another waved off a couple of bees. Someone got to the excavator and pulled the door open, only for a handful of snakes to spill out. The operator was unconscious, his face stung red with bees, some of which still crawled over him. His rescuers dropped him, shocked by the hissing vipers in the cabin. Rattlesnakes, it sounded like. I stopped. The guy who'd tripped started screaming about a bite, and another physically had to kick off a rodent trying to crawl up his leg. I could see things moving in the dirt, spiders and ants, side by side, heading the way of the excavator like an insectoid parade. And for the first time since I got there, I could hear life. Birdsong, screeching falcons. And looking up, I could see them, circling the nest together, like a cohesive flock, like a perfect circling halo of wings and beaks. All of them just waiting for someone to step out of line, to get a little too close. I helped in whatever way I could, and Wilson did too. 3 guys had rattlesnake bites, and the excavator operator got at least 30 or so bee stings on top of that. We had to call for an airlift to a hospital. For the rest of the afternoon, that was all we'd do, cleaning up the aftermath of what had turned into a royal clusterfuck. Michael was stuck talking to his boss, and a couple of people came out to see the pile with their own eyes. They discussed how to best get rid of it, but it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. They were too afraid to even get close enough to move the excavator. By late afternoon, I ended up sitting next to Michael on a stump. The crew had cleared out, but I wanted a statement for my report. I got one, but after the bureaucratic minutiae passed, I was left with a man that was worried for the safety of his people.
Never had a snake bite before,
he said.
The occasional bee sting, sure, but this is fucked.
Logging is dangerous business, I agreed. But yeah, this is new.
I'll be honest,
he continued.
We've had some trouble. Some guys wandering off their position. Someone twisting their ankle while on a walk to God knows where.
Didn't say anything about that in my file.
'Cause it makes us liable,
he explained. So we shut up about it. But that thing over there, that's the core of it. All of it. You had any sleepwalkers? I asked. Like, more than usual? Apparently it wasn't as unusual as I would have been led to believe. Michael explained, off the record, that it had happened a couple times a week over the past few months. Some equipment would go missing too. Mostly hand axes, meant to clear out branches so you can reach with your chainsaw. Some folks had been found wandering the outskirts of the clearing.
It wasn't until the foreman heard about it that we decided to deal with it.
He continued.
And here we are, dealing with it.
Now I could have gone back with Michael and the others, but this was turning into something I couldn't ignore. I was under enormous pressure to see this through and come to a satisfying conclusion. And I couldn't do that from behind a desk. I had to see this thing. I had to observe it with my own eyes and figure it out. I had a field kit with a small tent, a sleeping bag, and some basic necessities. I asked Michael to pick me up in the morning. He wasn't happy about it, but he figured I knew what I was doing. I think he might have had more faith in me than I did. There was no telling what was going to happen once the sun went down, but I intended to find out. So I stuck around, watching from a distance. The excavator just stood there, its signal orange arm still hanging in the air. A couple of birds had covered its joints in twigs and leaves, slowly transforming it into a makeshift metal tree. At some point, I must have nodded off. I think it was on top of that hill, just like Wilson. There isn't much to say about what happened at that time. I remember my eyes feeling heavy and my mouth being wide open. There was this weight to me, like I was sleeping under 2 feet of snow. At some point I forced my eyes open, as if trying to escape a nightmare. The sun was just about to set. Long golden shadows stretched out over the clearing, giving it the look of a quiet fire. I could see deer carefully dragging branches through the dirt, slowly moving past the excavator. Families of squirrels and rabbits rushed past my feet, pulling whatever they could along. And I was just standing there, in front of the pile, holding a hand axe. My arms ached. Then I dipped into the dark again. Despite my eyes being closed, it was easier to move. It's like something shared its vision with me, giving me a sensation of where to move and how. I remember something stinging my hand. Perhaps I cut myself on something sharp. And yet, my eyes stayed close, and my body limber. It wasn't so much a dream as it was an out-of-body experience. When I got too sore to continue, I crawled. I thought about the comfort of my tent, the warm sleeping bag nestled under my neck, the breathing fabric swaying in the wind, colouring my world a mild tint of cyan. But when I opened my eyes, that's not where I was. I was in the middle of the nest, resting on a pile of moss. The inside was lined with grass, leaves, and wildflowers. I specifically remember my half-open eyes looking into the dark centre of a blue sunflower. My head leaned against something warm and leathery. I ran a tired hand over it. It felt like caressing a warm tire, segmented into armour-like plates. There was this sickly sweet smell coming from it, like burnt sugar. Looking down, I thought I saw fingers sticking out of the mud. They had a similar shape, but they were arranged in a liner, like the legs of a centipede. I dreamt of wandering the woods, feeling the ground shift underneath my feet, desperately looking for a safe haven, somewhere I could call home. I found this one spot, surrounded by a circle of wildflowers, and I was so relieved. Someone had built me a home. In that dream, I remember promising myself to never leave, no matter how old or how large I got. That was my home, my safe harbour, away from the storm. And I would ask all my friends to make my house bigger and stronger and safer. By the time I opened my eyes for real, I was curled up inside the middle of the nest. The moss was soft under my face. The early morning summer rays tried their best to creep through the labyrinth of brambles, managing to touch me across the cheek. I looked down at my hand, where there were 2 small bite marks. It didn't hurt. It didn't even itch. It was just there. I could barely make sense of it. There was no clear point where I could have crawled inside, and I had no memory of doing so. It's like I'd closed me eyes, and now I was there. Moving out in 20 minutes. The sound startled me. Turns out I still had Michael's walkie-talkie. I kept hearing updates on the walkie-talkie, and a handful of people responding to one another. Something was happening, and they were on the move. It didn't take long before I could hear them, and not longer still before I saw them. No excavators or bulldozers this time, just jeeps and people. I picked up the walkie-talkie and pressed it. There was no response. My voice wasn't coming through. There were at least 5 jeeps, maybe 6, all full of men with white helmets. They were coming back to finish what they'd started. I had to try and get them to turn back until we figured this out, but for that, I had to make my way out of the nest. And there was no way. I was completely closed off. Michael's voice came through in the distance. He didn't need a walkie-talkie for this,
We all have our reservations,
he said.
but this thing is a safety hazard. This is a measure to deal with that hazard. That's all there's to it.
They had signal orange jerry cans with the company logo. But more so, they carried bottles and metal cans, homemade fire bombs. And from their holsters, I could tell a couple of them were armed. An icy panic shot through my chest. Didn't they see I was in here? How could they miss me? I tried calling out to them, but there was no response. I twisted and turned, kicking at the side of the nest, but I couldn't find my way out. The branches and twigs were packed so tight they could keep me warm through the winter if need be. I saw the first flame light up, and my voice went from a passionate plea to an animalistic screeching. There was a struggle among the crew as two of them stepped back, while the others lit up their firebombs. One by one, flames took hold. The homemade explosives weren't as much firebombs as they were fire starters, but the dry leaves and branches offered little resistance. I remember watching this one wildflower catch fire, mere inches from my feet. A curious blue turned a charcoal black, and as I felt the heat across my skin, I knew this was no longer a dream. I twisted and turned. I thrashed, screamed, and cut myself bloody trying to get out. The smoke seeped into the gums of my teeth as I cried for help. In the branches, I could see the many creatures that had made it their home. Unlike me, they didn't protest. Maybe they realized it was already too late. They just sat there, watching the fire spread. They wouldn't scream as the fire reached their fur and feathers, like captains going down with their ship. The smell of burnt fur choked me more than the smoke ever did. More fire, from different directions. The crew was spreading out, making sure to get at every angle. Despite my struggle, I'd only managed to move inches. I couldn't dig, and I couldn't push anything out of the way. I was stuck, and the flames were getting closer. The heat stuck to the smoke, tainting the sweat pouring out of my forehead. I was going to burn alive in that hole, and they were never going to know. And no matter how much I screamed, or cried, or begged, they couldn't, or wouldn't, hear me. Then the fire reached my legs. That first burn seeped through my shoes. At that moment, the sting on my hand shot through my nerves. Something cold. My eyes were wide open, but I had the sensation of opening them again, like there was a second layer to my vision. And all of a sudden, I wasn't inside that nest anymore. I was on the outside, right next to the crew, being held back by two of Michael's guys. "Calm the fuck down!" one of them demanded. "What the fuck's wrong with you?" They held an arm each, having wrestled me to the ground. "The fire," I gasped. You were killing me. You're killing me." "We're almost done," the other man said. "You need to calm down." One of them looked up. He slowly let go of my arm. Seconds later, the other did too. I looked up, seeing the crew spread out across the hills surrounding the pile, their silhouettes outlined by the fire starters in their hands. Something was coming out of the nest. The closest thing I can describe it as is a centipede. But you must understand, this thing was the size of a tiger. A massive white thing, segmented, with arm-long antennae at the front and rear. It moved slowly, each twitch of a leg calculated and deliberate. It had black patches on its chitin where the fire had licked it, and even now, it could move at breakneck speed if need be. The crew murmured. A couple took pictures. Michael moved up to it with a pump-action shotgun as the others yelled at him to be careful. Part of me wanted to rush at him and tackle him to the ground. If I blinked hard enough, I could feel myself in the place of that creature. I could feel myself crawling in its place, in the dirt. Things got quiet as Michael raised his shotgun at it. My body rumbled as I felt the creature's trachea tremble. It wanted to be left alone. It was furious and terrified. Then, a gunshot, but not from a shotgun. I don't think anyone had noticed Wilson walking up to us, pistol raised. He pointed it at Michael and spoke. As he did, something twitched in my arm. It was as if I knew the words before Wilson said them, like I felt them.
I want to go,
Wilson said.
I just want to go away.
I mouthed the words along with him and noticed again how Wilson's eyes were closed, just like when he'd thrown branches onto the pile.
Wilson,
Michael called back.
what the fuck do you think you're doing?
Let me go.
Wilson and I muttered.
Let me go away.
Then fucking go.
Michael yelled back, turning his attention back to the creature. The centipede moved as Michael raised his shotgun. Wilson raised his pistol. And as Michael took his shot, all hell broke loose. The shotgun went wild as a bullet grazed Michael's arm. Someone returned fire. Wilson kept shooting, seemingly at random. I think someone got him in the leg. Michael took another shot at the centipede, but it slithered away, rushing for the woods. A couple more shots rang out. Maybe a couple of them hit, but nothing decisive. The thing just kept going, and in the dark of the woods, even a startling white colour can disappear. I stayed on the ground, writhing. I was scared, uncomfortable, cold, and at the same time sweating. Let me go, I muttered. I'll go somewhere else. I knew Wilson said it too. I know the remaining birds said it. It was sung and whispered and chittered in every living thing, in 1,000 different ways. And it would be said over and over and over, as they all waited patiently to burn. By morning, the nest was a smouldering heap. Michael had only been grazed by the bullet, but one of his crewmen drove him to the hospital. Wilson had taken a shot to his left leg, but couldn't recall why or by whom. In the end, they all decided to just keep things quiet. An illegal burning and an illegal gunfight sort of cancelled each other out. My job was made very simple, as the claim was cancelled. Nothing more to investigate. My superiors weren't exactly pleased, but at least it was cleanly resolved, and I hadn't made things worse. They didn't involve the insurance companies, and there were no accusations levelled against surrounding logging companies. No suspicion of foul play. On paper, there was nothing out there but unfortunate, natural circumstances. A couple of years have passed since. While the strange wound on my hand has healed, I still feel a little twitch every now and then, especially when I'm out in the woods. I might pick up the occasional stick without noticing or turning my head, without knowing why. Ranger Wilson has since retired from his position, and I suspect this incident might have been the thing to push him over the edge. Looking back at it all, I know something is still out there. Whenever I close my eyes hard enough, I can still hear it asking all its friends for help. It's building a house, a bigger one, with more friends. Perhaps next time no one will notice it. Until they do. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. That was Slumberjack Woods, by Reddit's own Saturdead. Did anyone else feel insanely sorry for the centipede creature at the end? I didn't cry. Okay, maybe a little. Time for tonight's not so fun fact. Chainsaws were originally invented for childbirth. Yep, it's true. Google it. Not cool doctors of 1785. Not cool. Let that sink in next time you hear one buzzing in the woods. While you're here, can you do me a favor and hit subscribe? Only about 10% of the people who watch actually do, and it makes a huge difference. This channel is dedicated to horror in all its forms. Original stories by me, the very best from Reddit, true stories that keep you awake, and tragically terrifying true crime. And yep, I'm a one-woman band here. Writing, editing, narrating, all on my own, mainly because I don't have friends. Cue tiny violin. If you'd like to be extra awesome, my PayPal link is in the comments. Your donation, no matter how small, will go towards, hopefully, making this a full-time thing. Until then, I have to do the whole work thing as well, and that's like not cool. Actually, it is pretty cool. I make hyper-realistic fantasy and horror dolls, see? Interacting in any way with any of my videos really helps, even if it's just liking or counting the mistakes I make and putting them in the comments. Don't be mean though. I'm sensitive. Good night.